Vaibhav. In today's session of Visual JForex, I will be explaining to you the component named default variables. These are the components of the Visual JForex board which we utilize to design and develop the algorithm. So let's get started for the day. We now head to the Visual JForex board which has been developed by the Dukascopy Bank SA. Here on the right hand side, you will find all the variables listed on this platform. In the prior sessions, we had seen the utility of the user's variable and the auto-created variables. In today's session, I will be explaining to you the default variables. Default variables mean once you define the input parameter, this will be considered default for whole of the algorithm. So when you use that particular variable again, the default value assigned to it will be there and you don't really need to change it unless it is required for setting any particular condition. So these are the default variables: default instrument, default trade amount, default slippage, default stop loss, default take profit, and default period. If we take any indicator or any component, if it contains any default variable, its input value will be there as a default. I will give you an example. Any indicator, if we choose, suppose we are taking the momentum indicator here, the ADX. Now there are certain values which we need to define and there are certain default values which are provided to us as a default. We can change them, we can change the default values also. Now here, if you look at it, the default instrument is provided to us as the Euro USD. If we take any other indicator, then also the default value will be the same. Here also in this indicator we have the default instrument as the Euro USD and the default period is 10 minutes. Suppose if I want to change it, I can change that, and once you change its value, the same will be available to us in all other indicators. Suppose if we change the default value for instrument, instead of Euro USD, if we change the instrument to any other pair and save it, now the default instrument is NZD JPY and it will be there in all other indicators or components which we use. Now Arun indicator I have taken a new, and here also the default instrument has now been changed to NZD JPY. Similar thing you can observe about the period. Suppose if we change default period, we can edit the variable. Instead of 10 minutes, suppose if we make it hourly, not default value for the default period is hourly, and in this case we can change. Now this is not default variable, this is the time period defined at 10 minutes, so we have this value. But if we remove this and take the default period as our value, we will have the hourly, and if we want to set any condition using the if else block, even in that scenario the default value, once you define it, will remain the same for all over the algorithmic structure. All you have to do is change the input value once and it will be reflected in all other places. So that's the utility of the default values. Coming to the instrument back again, here we will have multiple components of the default instrument, and these components will change as we change the instrument. Now this pip size for NZD JPY is defined in 2 decimal points. For example, if we take the NZD JPY here on the chart, you will see that its value is always taken in 2 decimal points. Let me find the NZD JPY. Here it is. Okay, so pips. Now coming to pips, the pips are counted in two decimal points, and if we look at the Euro USD, pips are counted in four decimal points. This fifth numerical after the decimal point is a fraction of the pips, not a single pip. When we are looking at a pip value for the NZD-JPY, it is 73.71, and for Euro USD it is 1.2064. So whenever there is increase or decrease, we will also have to consider the fraction value, but overall it is the these are the four decimal points which are considered while counting the pips. Now again we head back to the Visual JForex board. The pip scale, if you want to use any pip scale to set any condition, you can take this variable, and as I have said earlier also, as we change the instrument, these values will change, pip size will change, pip scale will change, minimum trade amount. Now minimum trade amount you need when you have to define the amount of the trading size, and when you are placing the order, let us take into account the trading component like open at market, and here also we get some default values. Default instrument is there, default trade amount. The default trade amount, this will be the component, but if you want to change this parameter, you can do that. The trade amount instrument is there, the type of the instrument group, and this per contract, the country of the instrument, all these sub all these parts of this default instrument variable are provided to us to be used while defining the conditions. Coming to the default trade amount, if you are using multiple buy and sell orders in the single algorithm and you want to define certain amount which will be executed whenever the conditions are met, you can do that using the default trade amount. All you have to do is edit the variable here, and all over the algorithm wherever this variable is used, its value will change and the new value which we have assigned will be visible there. So here you can see default slippage. Slippage is the difference between the order price and the execution price. Sometimes whenever the volatility is tad too high, we see slippage occurring between the order price and the execution price, and we can allow certain amount of slippage to be bearable, but if it increases beyond that, we can go for the order cancellation. So we can take this default slippage and define it, and that will be there for us to use whenever we are developing the algorithm. Coming to the stop loss and take profit, we have these two input parameters, and when we place the order, we also have to place the stop loss and take profit order. These are the default values which are visible to you. The default take profit is defined at 50 pips. The default stop loss value has been defined at 25 pips. And as I have said earlier also while explaining the trade amount, whenever we are using multiple open at market blocks or pending open blocks, we can set the stop loss value which will be the same for all the order execution blocks, and we can keep this uniform all across the multiple orders, and all we have to do is define certain default stop loss or the default take profit level, and that will be there while the orders execute. Default period I have already explained, so that is already done. So we are almost done with the default variables. If you find anything has been difficult to understand, you can raise your query in the feedback section, and I will be more than happy to take the discussion forward. I hope you have got the idea of how to utilize these variables provided to us on the Visual JForex platform. Looking forward to the next session. Thank you all for joining in. Do subscribe to the Dukascopy webinar channel. Goodbye.